You're listening to author Jason Lee Willis read The Alchemist Map. Prologue, Paris, France, 1830. Lady Margaret Drummond smiled as she stood outside the door of the Paris Observatory. So the rumors about the map are true. She waited for her tall footman to raise the parasol to shield her from the afternoon sun. She didn't have to wait long. Whitmore might have been a brute, but his strong hands were deft with the delicate lever on the parasol. Once in the shadow, Lady Drummond looked for the carriage, but it was no longer parked at the end of the newly paved walkway. Instead, a dozen French soldiers stood at the front gate. "Whitmore, where is our carriage?" The driver was forced to move it around a block, milady. It's parked over there, Whitmore said and pointed. A strong metal fence surrounded the entire observatory complex, isolating it from the city and Lady Margaret Drummond from her carriage. "I am an old woman. Who had the audacity to force us to move the carriage?" Lady Drummond snapped. "I apologize, my lady, but King Charles is coming to the observatory tonight." "King Charles is coming here?" Lady Drummond asked. "It would seem so, milady. Shortly after you entered the observatory, soldiers came to secure the entire block. It took quite a bit of explanation for them to not chase me off. Apparently, King Charles has questions about Halley's Comet and wanted Professor Nicollet to explain it to him." Lady Drummond's eyebrow rose at the thought. The signature of Professor Nicollet is suddenly worth even more. "What did you say to them?" "I told them you were meeting with Professor Nicollet to discuss matters of astronomy, and that we would be returning to our hotel within the hour." Lady Drummond glanced down at the cylindrical case she held in her hands. "Good. I'm surprised King Charles is still residing in Paris, considering the political turmoil he is facing." Near the side gate, where the carriage now waited, she saw a pair of soldiers standing in the shade of a young oak. "Did your meeting with Professor Nicollet go well, milady?" Whitmore asked as they walked. "It did." Lady Drummond found herself smiling after a moment of reflection. "Nicollet is an excitable fellow who seems incapable of giving a succinct answer, but he provided all the verification I need to fetch a higher price." "With your permission, milady, when we return to the hotel, I'd like to pay a visit to this antiquities dealer, Monsieur Berengar." "I'd rather deal with Berengar myself." Of course, milady, but I'd like to investigate the Fontaine de Elephant neighborhood and watch over his shop for a while. I won't speak with the man. I just want to make sure you'll be safe." "Safe? How much does Whitmore know about this map? The sooner it is out of my life, the better." "Yes, I suppose once we return to the hotel, you could investigate matters for me." The two soldiers opened the gate for them as they passed to the street. Before Whitmore could even put away the parasol, the carriage door flew open. "What took you so long?" The saucy question came from Lady Drummond's teenage niece, Susan, who had waited in the carriage with the driver and a small fortune in new dresses and shoes. "Remember, you're selling it for the family." "Professor Nicollet was thorough in his examination of the map, as well as his certificate of authenticity." "Which means you'll get more money for it?" Susan asked, extending a hand to help her aunt into the carriage. "Money that will be used to sustain the estate, not to fill your closets," Lady Drummond amended. At Whitmore's insistence, they drove through Paris with the curtains drawn until they returned to the safety of their hotel. The Pavilion de la Reine Hotel had all the finest amenities a wealthy tourist such as Lady Drummond might want. It was situated in the Marais, one of Paris's loveliest squares. It had private dining and a spacious lobby for its aristocratic guests, yet was located near some of the best shopping districts, which appealed to Susan. The duplex suite on the top floor, which Lady Drummond had chosen, had beautiful decor, an elegant bathroom, 4 poster beds, and a state-of-the-art safe. Susan reached for the doorknob and found it locked. "Do you have the key, Aunt Maggie?" Whitmore set the packages on the floor and handed the key to Susan. Lady Drummond, could I get the address of Berenger's shop? Of course, she said, and handed him the map canister so she could open the purse. Along with the papers from Professor Nicollet, she'd found the letters she'd exchanged with Berenger and other antiquity dealers, both in France and Paris. In England. Gerard Berenger, Fontaine de la Elephant, 117 Rue de la Contrescarpe. Thank you, Lady Drummond. I will call on you when I return. Thank you, Whitmore. Susan carried the shopping bags into the suite while Lady Drummond clutched the canister. Once all the bags were inside, she bolted the door. If what Nicollet said is true, this map was the oldest item in my brother's collection. What do you want me to do with your new shoes? Susan asked from the pile of bags. Just put them on the table. I'll come look at them in just a bit. Lady Drummond walked to the other room. Do you want help with the safe? Susan called out loudly. I'll just be a moment. Are you sure? I know what I'm doing, Lady Drummond answered sharply. She didn't. With the balcony curtains closed, it took her 3 attempts to dial to unlock the safe. But then the big hinges creaked loudly. Lady Drummond sat on the rug in front of the open safe, her back to the doorway. She set the map and her purse at the side. Now open, the 3-foot-tall floor safe revealed its pathetic contents: 2 jewelry boxes and a fat wallet of money. I have no choice but to sell this map after my brother squandered our family fortune. What good does it do us if our castle crumbles around us in disrepair? Thinking of her selfish niece, she suddenly became aware that the rustling of shopping bags had stopped. Then she heard a soft whimper. Turning, Lady Drummond saw a man wearing a gentleman's outfit and polished shoes, standing with a gloved hand over Susan's mouth, and the other hand holding a double-edged knife at her niece's throat. If she hadn't already been sitting on the floor, Lady Drummond might have fainted. The man removed the knife from Susan's throat for a moment, holding it out and up as a sign of parley. The gesture revealed that 2 of his 3 fingers had been removed, leaving him with a delicate grasp on the hilt. A thief. Lady Drummond watched as the 3-fingered man pointed to the metal cylinder in front of them. Open it, he said softly but firmly. She complied, and from the soft velvet interior of the tube, a yellowed map emerged, wrapped in wax paper. All of Nicollet's verifications and assessments now came to nothing. Good. Now put it back in the cylinder and roll it over to me, the man instructed. That's my family's fortune. How do I let this thief just walk away with it? Lady Drummond nodded, and the map vanished back into the tube, which she sealed and set on the floor. Without Whitmore to protect her, she knew it fell on her to not only protect Susan, but the entire House of Drummond. Even though her hands shook, Lady Drummond managed a coordinated roll, and the tube traveled over the rug and onto the bare floor, stopping just a few feet from where the 3-fingered man stood. As he glanced down at the cylinder, Lady Drummond slipped her hand into her purse. Just under the papers from Nicollet, she found a small pistol for just such an occasion. Her hand found the cold curve of the grip, but as she looked back up to aim, the knife flew from the man's hand directly toward her face. The world exploded with blinding pain, and she saw the floor rush up to crash against her cheek. Her body began to twitch and move like a marionette upon unseen strings. The dull crunch of breaking bones and a soft thud came right before she heard footsteps moving closer. Chapter 1. Paris, France, 1830. The cave wall turned, and beyond a bend, pale light illuminated the rocky path. With each cautious step and tentative reach, the source of the light became obvious. A woman trapped in ice. Joseph Nicollet studied her face on the other side of the opaque sheet of ice. which stood floor to ceiling at the end of the cave. Her placid face and closed eyes gave the impression of sleep instead of death, and her white gown moved in the gentle currents of the water suspending her. Her eyes opened. Nicollet gasped and stepped away from the sheet of ice, then, just as quickly, rushed forward to place his palms upon the rigid surface. "Where did you go?" she asked him. "It's not her," Nicollet told himself. She didn't have blue eyes. Her hair flowed in the water, and the light made it vary from shades of light blonde to deep burgundy. Her face held the prime of youth, white and without blemish. "Why didn't you look for me?" "I did look for you," Nicollet answered, the ice melting under his palms. In its reflection, he saw himself as a vibrant young man in plain garb, trousers, suspenders, and a white shirt. "I've found you." "No," she said. "You have forgotten me. But it's not too late. Come and find me, Nicky." Her form withdrew from the ice until she was only a light in the darkness. Nicollet reached down to the floor of the cave, picked up a heavy stone, and smashed it against the ice. He struck it again and again. Finally, it broke through the ice, but a torrent of water swept him away and back down into the darkness of the cave. Joseph Nicollet awoke to the sound of ticking. His tired eyes slowly focused on the far wall of his living room, where the chorus of periodic clicks echoed. Still clothed in his dinner jacket, he reached into his pocket of his vest and found his father's watch. "Almost 2 o'clock in the morning," Nicollet noted. "Why can't I sleep?" A few lamps had gone out, but his house remained well lit, casting a glow on the remnants of the evening celebration. He sat on one end of the couch with a beautiful young woman leaning against him, while an equally handsome young man slept on the other end. He slid out gently, resting the woman's blonde head on the tall arm of the couch. Because of the alcohol still in his system, it took a few moments for him to find his balance, but he held a steady course to the far wall behind the piano, where 12 clocks hung. One by one, he compared each clock against his pocket watch until he found the Bavarian cuckoo clock to be the mistimed culprit. In the glass of his 16th century Italian wall clock, Nicollet found his own reflection. At 47, he still had a youthful face and dark curly hair, even though his career was far from healthy. Around his neck he wore the Lalande medal, although it might as well have been a professional noose. Instead of a panel of peers, the medal had been given by the government of King Charles, and despite dozens of friends who helped celebrate the accomplishment, he could see in their eyes it further tarnished his waning reputation. He took it off and tossed it aside. Leaning against the piano where his violin now rested, Nicollet watched the second hand spin and around the clocks until a symphony of chimes brought the top of the hour. "What time is it?" Back on the couch, Juliana Leaves stirred without opening her eyes. Her brother Charlie remained unconscious. "It's late," Nicollet said to her, and as he walked back toward the couch, his toe hit a bottle, spinning it wildly across the floor. Juliana opened her eyes. "Are you mad at me?" "Of course not," he said, pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. She gently kissed his hand, and he stroked her blonde hair. "Tomorrow is a new day. Go back to sleep. My world is changing too quickly." Nicollet gathered wine glasses, smiling at the memories of each holder. Tonight, while he and John Herschel played music, Juliana Leaves and Margaret Herschel danced for a crowd of scientists, intellectuals, and philosophers. "I can't leave such a mess for Cosette," Nicollet decided, knowing his hired maid would be arriving at the break of dawn to cook his breakfast. The door to the kitchen remained closed, keeping the hedonistic spill from ruining the kitchen. With his hands full of wine glasses, Nicollet leaned his back against the door to push it open. "A fine party." The voice startled him, and a stray wine glass fell to the floor and broke into 100 pieces. A bearded Frenchman sat at the small kitchen table with notebooks and documents spread over it. "Shouldn't you be home with Rosine?" Nicollet asked, carefully setting the rest of the wine glasses on the counter. The 40-year-old man sitting at his table was his friend, Jean-Francois Champollion, the curator of the Louvre Museum, who'd just returned from Egypt with crates of antiquities and an unseemly beard that reached to the middle of his chest. "Absence makes the heart grow fonder. We can't all be wildly in love like you and Juliana." This is going to hurt him more than I thought. "Juliana is returning to England to marry Edward Sabine," Nicollet said before turning his attention to the shards of glass on the floor. "Say it isn't so," Champollion said. "She certainly has a thing for aging astronomers, but Juliana adores you." "She adores attention," Nicollet said, allowing himself a little bitterness. The two of us have a mutual infatuation with science. I shall miss her company, though." "So it will be Charlie?" Nicollet laughed heartily. "No, sweet Charlie will also be returning to England with his sister. Between my tarnished reputation and the tensions in Paris, Mr. Leaves thought it best they return home. They offered me a cottage for the summer." "You should accept," Champollion said a bit too eagerly. Nicollet stopped hiding to study his friend. "I hardly noticed you tonight. What are you doing at my kitchen table?" "Planning a new revolution," Champollion said, raising his thick eyebrows playfully. Honesty wrapped in sarcasm. While Nicollet's career in astronomy had been built with what remained of the ancient regime, noblemen, clergymen, members of royalty, Jean-Francois Champollion's career gained international renown during the reign of Napoleon, and even afterwards when he deciphered the famed Rosetta Stone, unlocking the Egyptian hieroglyphic language for the first time in a millennia. Although friends, Champollion remained a symbol of science freed from the shackles of the church, while Nicollet was an enigma, a devout Catholic scientist. "Alas, I have nothing to offer your cause other than fine wine," Nicollet remained cordial, "and it seems as if even the wine is now gone." "I've heard rumors of your financial difficulties," Champollion said, gathering up the papers. "With the death of Laplace, your career is falling faster than a shooting star. But you are a man of true talent. You'll land on your feet. Do you remember how that plagiarism scandal almost ruined me? You will soon recover, but you might want to recover in England." Is that a threat or a warning? Champollion quickly gathered up his paperwork and shoved it all in a satchel. "I will leave you to your domestic duties and show myself out." "If I left for England, I would miss all of our conversations about the occult world," Nicollet said. He followed his guest out of the kitchen and back into the main room. "There are few scientists with such tales of spooks and specters." "The world is full of mystery," Champollion said as he passed by Juliana Leaves. "There is magic out there still to be discovered." That is what Humboldt said, too. Nicollet followed him out onto the dark steps facing the silent streets of the Savoy district, nestled a few blocks from the Seine River. Champollion looked up to the night sky. "So, where is your comet?" "It won't be visible for another 5 years," Nicollet said of Halley's comet, upon which his wobbling reputation still stood. "But it is out there." Champollion nodded and began walking. "Do the Egyptians write of comets?" Nicollet's question caused Champollion to stop. I found accounts from Chinese historians that seem to align with the timing of Halley's Comet. I'm sure accounts will be found, Champollion said, standing near the big elm in Nicollet's front yard. The Egyptians used stars for aligning the pyramids. The ancients understood astronomy better than crusty Irish astronomers like Edward Sabine. Yes, in fact, I'd like to speak with you about Mesopotamia. What do you know about Phoenician astronomy? Did I rush the question? I should have waited for another time. Well, Phoenician culture advanced during the same time period as Egyptian culture. So there are quite a few. Nicollet heard it also, snoring in the darkness. It came from the deep shadows of the elm tree's trunk, near Champollion. In a flash, Champollion had a pistol drawn, and with 3 quick steps he vanished into the shadows. A groan followed a hard kick. Who are you? Champollion asked. What are you doing here? Please, sir, I am unarmed, a young man's voice answered in a panic. Nicollet, fetch a light, Champollion ordered. Nicollet spun back around, running back inside to grab the lamp of the stairway post leading to the second floor. When he stepped back outside, Champollion pulled the stranger to the steps with his left hand while pointing the pistol in his face with his right. Who are you? Champollion asked the young man, who appeared no older than 14. Louis Sajan. Who sent you to spy on this house? I'm not spying, Sajan said. I was sent to deliver a message to Professor Nicollet. Oh dear. I am Nicollet? I was sent by Father Simmons, Sajan said. Just what I thought, Champollion said. A spy of the Catholic Church. I'm not a spy. I'm the son of the organist at St. Sulpice. Father Simmons sent me to collect Professor Nicollet, but when I arrived, there were so many people I decided to wait until everyone left, but then I fell asleep. I don't believe him, Champollion said. He was sent here to keep track of all those at your party. Empty your pockets. The boy had no weapons, no writing utensils, yet did have a folded letter, which Champollion held up to Nicollet's lamp. Who is Lady Drummond? Again? What did I get involved in? The ghost of the murdered noblewoman already haunted him. She contacted me a few months ago about matters of astronomy, and 3 days ago she visited my office at the observatory to have me inspect an astronomical item. She was murdered? Champollion added after looking at the letter again. Yes, the police came and asked me questions about her, and they told me she was killed during a robbery. Luckily, I was entertaining King Charles and Cardinal Croiselier. And who is this Father Simmons? Champollion asked. I have no idea, Nicollet said to Champollion. Then he turned to the boy, extending a hand to help the lad off the ground. I take Mass at St. Sulpice, so I'm familiar with your father, but who is this Father Simmons? The terrified boy kept darting his eyes at Champollion. Yesterday was the first time I had ever met him. I saw him speak with Bishop Deucalion, and then he left. I swear I wasn't spying. You should hurry home, Nicollet said to the boy. Tell your father that you delivered the letter, and that I will give it my full attention. The boy ran down the walkway and vanished beyond the yard wall. A murder investigation? Champollion asked. Your streak of bad luck continues. For your sake, I avoid meeting with any Catholic officials in the near future, even those at St. Sulpice. For my sake? Dear Francois, what awful plans are you and your friends hatching? Nicollet tried to focus on the common ground he shared with his radical friend. I'd like to speak with you about the map Lady Drummond showed me. It was quite curious. Curious enough for an old lady to be murdered? When life allows it, stop by and visit me at the Louvre. When life allows? Champollion nodded earnestly before glancing over his shoulder. I think I'm still a little drunk. If you could point me in the direction of my museum, I'd be in your debt. Nicollet pointed in the direction of the Seine and watched his friend vanish into the darkness.
Chapter 2. 100 miles away in the port city of Le Havre, Jacques Palissy clamored for his pistol after 3 loud knocks on the door woke him. The young man walked through the living room and glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. A knock this late at night means trouble. On the large kitchen table, he saw 24 letters still spread out on the table and rushed over to scoop them all up and shove them in a nearby satchel. He cocked the pistol and approached the door from the side. "Who is it?" he asked, feeling vulnerable in only his breeches. "Open the door, Palissy," a man answered in French, yet with a strange accent. The Russian. It had been a month since Palissy had last seen him, and his hand shook as he reached for the chain, bolt, and door lock. Even when he opened the door a few inches, he kept the pistol ready. The 3 fingers gripped the outer knob and opened it the rest of the way, revealing the cold eyes of Krasden Kraj, who held something other than a weapon in his hand. Kraj stepped into the small apartment, closed the door, and locked himself in with Palissy. "Is that what I think it is?" Palissy asked, hoping his information would be rewarded with promotion instead of murder. "Come see for yourself," Kraj said as he walked over to the table. From the metal cylinder, he carefully extracted another fabric tube, which he gently unrolled to reveal an ornate map. An honest-to-goodness treasure map, Palissy thought. The letters from England were true. "There is a change of plans," Kraj said as he studied the hands drawn upon the map. Hearing this, Palissy felt himself squeezing the pistol handle tighter, ready to defend himself against the assassin. "My attempts to steal the map prior to it being sold to Berenguer didn't work, and things got a little messy. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to wrap up any loose ends, especially if the Drummond family begins their own investigation." Palissy's left arm stayed at his side, frozen by fear. "Your services at La Poste are no longer needed." Kraj straightened his back, glanced at the pistol, and then into the eyes of Palissy. "I'm going to need you to bring this map to America for me." Relief, confusion, and despair flooded over him when he realized Kraj had not come to murder him. "What about you?" Kraj's dark eyes studied him without a fleck of emotion. "We can trust you, can't we?" "Of course you can," Palissy said, "but—" "Our benefactor will find you a new career in America. If you want to remain a postman, pick a city. He's a powerful man, and when you hand this over to him, he'll give you a deserving reward." "You're staying in France?" Palissy asked. "The influence of the Drummond family has waned recently," Kraj assessed, "but there will be investigations into Lady Drummond's death, and our benefactor will not want any loose ends." Palissy looked down at the ornate case holding a stolen map to an uncertain prize. "Yes, I'll go to America," he thought, and then vanish before this psychopath decides I know too much also. Chapter 3. The French Revolution of 1830, later known as the July Revolution, took place over 3 sweltering days in July, when members of the Ancien regime were vacationing and the workers in the city were miserable. The explosion of violence had been festering for 6 years from an even older wound. King Charles of the House of Bourbon had inherited his throne from his brother, and he immediately began pandering to the Catholic Church and supporters of the ancient regime. When King Charles suspended the freedom of press, 50 journalists signed a collective protest and sparked a second revolution. During the first day of riots, the Garde Royale patrolled the streets during the day, but by night, cries against aristocrats and ministers and calls for the guillotine filled the street. After failed negotiations, the riot turned into a revolution by the second day. 4,000 barricades were erected in the Parisian streets, keeping any military support from rushing in to crush the riots. The tricolored flag soon flew throughout the city as the last bastions of the ancient regime were swept away. By mid-morning, the Swiss guards ran from their posts at the Louvre. Next, the Palace of Justice on the Ile de la Cité fell to the crowds, followed by the Archbishop's Palace. Across the Seine, both the Hôtel de Ville and Tuileries Palace fell by afternoon. Several blocks from the fighting, Gerard Berenguer prepared to defend his shop against looters, liberals, or aristocrats. Anyone who steps through the night door deserves death, he decided. Berenguer carried a fowling gun, a hunting rifle used to take down birds. He did not want to murder, only dissuade anyone from pillaging his import shop. While the rioters had swept through the districts looking for chairs, desks, and tables to create barricades in the streets to prevent the military sweeping, Berenguer had created his own barricade at the entrance to his shop. Now, a dozen whiskey barrels, imported from Tennessee, formed a wall across the large shop window and entrance door, something he could reasonably patrol by himself. He peered through the gaps between the barrels for a glimpse out into the streets. Although there had been a lot of shooting, shouting, and destruction, all that remained now was a mess of debris in the streets. Everyone who did not join the riot hunkered down, remembering the bloodbaths in the previous revolution. Reinforcements from the military did not concern him. He didn't even give too much thought to the liberal mob trying to take control of the government. Berenguer worried about looters and enemies. They will come under cover of darkness. His shop faced the street of a shopping district, but the back of his shop had access to a canal, where goods, both legal and illegal, could be brought in from the four corners of the world. While the most transparent funds came from imported alcohol from across the world, he also sold more exotic wares. A small staircase led to his modest three-room apartment above his shop, where he guarded his more expensive products. His barricade made it almost impossible to see the staircase, and if a large crowd did come seeking access to alcohol, he would offer it to them rather than die for a few beverages. Upstairs, however, was an apothecary's shop of international drugs. Laudanum, opium, exotic tobaccos, powders, pastes, and even poisons from cellars across the 7 seas had become the backbone of his business. It was a collection that had taken 20 years to acquire, which is why he had the fowling gun. The back door had also been barricaded from the inside, but the door could be opened a few inches before crates and beams prevented it from opening further. Berenguer looked through his slivered window to the canal. At one end, a small bridge led to the Seine, and at the other, the massive statue of an elephant stood as a testament to previous failures, both the Bastille and the era of Napoleon. The pattern of gunfire intensified in the direction of the elephant. The mob is moving north. Have they taken the city in only 2 days? If the revolution had rolled past his district already, it would still be days before order could be restored. The real danger will come tonight. Berenguer sat on a stool normally used at the cash register, but now placed in the middle of the room. At his perch, he placed the fowling gun across his lap and yawned, waiting. Over the next few hours, several noises caused him to ready his rifle, but most looters kept hunting, looking for easier prey. While he sat in the darkness of his shop, the outside lights, moon, stars, fires, torches, made it easy to see when someone passed by. Sneaking up was almost impossible, with debris and glass littering the streets on both sides of his shop. A week earlier, Berenguer would have given a friendly wave to a passerby, but tonight he would greet them with lead shot. A horsefly bit his right shoulder, and as he swatted at it, he almost dropped his gun from his lap. "Dirty bastard," Berenger muttered, and his left hand, stretching over his shoulder to the fleshy area above his scapula, found a bit of blood and a feathery dart. What the hell? Berenger stood to turn around and face the direction of the dart had come from, the barricaded staircase. But as soon as his feet touched the floor, his legs gave way, and he collapsed onto the ground. His hands gripped the fowling rifle tightly, sensing imminent danger. He turned the rifle toward the stairs and then heard a slight puff of air. A second dart hit him in the belly, without the same sting. Numb, he thought as the rifle slid from his fingers. Everything is numb. From the staircase, he saw a bit of movement, and a moment later, a few crates toppled and fell from the stairs to the space where he normally made transactions with customers. The rooftop, Berenger realized too late. I did not secure the rooftop. More crates came tumbling down the staircase as the stranger's foot easily cleared away an obstacle more visual than effective. In his hands, he held a 4-foot stick. Not a stick, a dart gun. "Gerard Berenger, it is time we talk plainly." I know that voice. The strange accent. It was so dark inside the shop that even when the man stood over him, he still could not see the face. "Plant," Berenger muttered. "Jean Plant. He came in a week ago looking to order an exotic vodka. Horikla. Why is he here?" "You remember me? Perhaps I should pick aliases harder to remember. You are probably realizing that I have not returned for the Horikla. The numbing sensation you are feeling is a toxin from the Kukoi frog. The people of the Embera tribe in Panama prick the skin of the Kukoi frog to poison their dart for hunting. I hope you are not feeling too much pain. The two of us are just errand boys. I wish you no ill will after all." Outside the door, shadows crossed by the barricade, followed by a loud gunshot. "Save me from this madman," Berenger called out to the mob. "I should get to the point. The clock is ticking." He squatted beside him, using the dart gun as a cane. In his other hand, the one with missing fingers, he held a small vial. One dart might have left you sick for a few days, but 2 darts will certainly seep into your heart and, more likely than not, kill you. Unless you take this, what is the word? Antidote. Well, whatever the word, I'll give this to you if you can answer a few of my questions, honestly. Now, since my last visit, I've been doing a bit of investigating into who you are and how you operate. So let's get right to the point. Who wanted to buy the Alchemist map? Who was your buyer? The Alchemist map. The Drummond map. Amaric. Berenger tried to voice a name, but his throat no longer obeyed his command. "I'm a fool for putting a second dart in you, but you had a rifle. I guess I lost my nerve." The 3-fingered man pulled Berenger off the floor, propping him up against the counter in a sitting position. "Just give me the antidote, and I'll tell you whatever you want." "Can you still nod and shake your head?" Berenger nodded. "Good. Let's get to the point. If Lady Drummond had managed to reach your shop and sell you her priceless family heirloom, she would have certainly had a wealthy buyer. Was the buyer French?" Berenger hesitated. "Let me rephrase. Does the buyer currently live in France?" He shook his head. "Excellent. Does the buyer currently live in England, Scotland, or Nova Scotia?" Again, Berenger shook his head. "Does the buyer currently live in the United States of America?" A nod. "Wonderful. Our masters probably even know each other. I'm not sure how many states there are now, but in your delicate condition, time is of the essence, so I won't just rattle down a list of places. Does your master belong to the Order of Eos?" With a nod, Berenger found himself looking at a small glass vial, which Plant held an inch from his nose. "Did you send Lady Drummond to Professor Nicollet, or did she do that on her own accord? That is not a yes or no question, is it? Professor Nicollet authenticated the age and subject of the map. Did you send her to him? I have no idea who this Nicollet fellow is. Just give me the anecdote, and I'll tell you everything about the Drummonds, my crazy American cousins, and that damned map. I'll even tell you the truth about the star. Just let me live. So was the old gal just greedy? More likely trying to drive up the price, which is how she got herself killed. She was going to try to negotiate with me. She's killed us both. Berenger nodded. Even after I left Professor Nicollet as the prime suspect, he avoided being put in custody. He seems to either be lucky or protected. Does Professor Nicollet have any connections to the Order of Eos? Freemasons, Carbonari, the Periphery, the Illuminati? 5 successive shrugs left the three-fingered man chuckling. You've earned this, Monsieur Berenger. Drink up. The vial of antidote touched his bottom lip, and the few ounces of precious liquid drained onto his tongue, numbing it even more. His throat constricted. Breathing grew more difficult. Not an antidote. Cocoa toxin. Chapter 4. Nicollet couldn't believe he was doing something so foolish. In his hand, he held an elegantly curved pistol with a polished brass hilt and artistic etchings along the plate of the firing mechanism. He cocked the flint so it would be ready to fire. Cosette Lavoisier sat across from him at the table, her arms crossed. In case something happens while I'm gone, Nicollet insisted, and slid the pistol across the table to her. This isn't my first riot, Cosette shrugged. I don't know what the revolution was like in the country, but it was hell on earth here in the city. Savages. We are both survivors, you and I, but the mob would only want to kill me. You should have the pistol. What would I do if there's more than one intruder? She asked. If I kill one of his friends, I'll be unarmed and matters will be even worse. Fire it in the air and run. The noise will certainly startle them, he countered and stood up, walking over to give her a peck on the cheek. You should take it with you. I'll probably shoot myself in the foot. I could never harm another human being. You know this. Besides, I'll need my hands free. Be careful, you gentle fool, Cosette added as Nicollet reached the door. You don't have to do this. I've been hiding inside for 3 days now. I could use some fresh air. Then take this locket. It has an engraving of Napoleon on it, and it will protect you in case any revolutionaries grab you. Get back before the sun comes up. The police will most likely ride in at dawn. Nicollet pulled out his father's watch. 30 minutes. I'll be back by 5:30. Dear Lord, what am I doing? Once outside, Nicollet realized all the street lamps were unlit or destroyed, leaving him at the mercy of his memory. Creeping out of his alley, Nicollet looked both ways down the silent Rue de Savoie. To his left was the familiar path to the Paris Observatory, which he had taken for the better part of 2 decades. To his right, there were 2 important stops he needed to make. Now is the safest time to do this, Nicollet convinced himself, and then gingerly began to tiptoe along the edges of darkness. For 3 days, Nicollet sat in his darkened house, listening to the chants and destruction happening in his beloved city. While the modest Savoy district was spared from complete destruction, the rioters brought fire to specific targets throughout the city, and a generation of disgruntled youth joined the revolutionaries until even the young grew tired and slept. The streets were narrow and the walls were tall, and hundreds of windows looked down at him at all times. Debris littered the streets, having been tossed down during the cheering and chanting, but when the shooting began, everyone closed the windows and barricaded themselves inside. The rioting had been loudest across the river, so Nicollet risked a quick peek. On the far bank, he could see dozens of armed citizens sitting along the outer gates of the Louvre, where more tricolored flags of the revolution hung. If Champollion wasn't a leader of the revolution, he at least made sure his museum was protected during the riot. Clever man. Five harrowing blocks later, Nicollet stood at the corner of Rue Palatine, looking at the majestic church of St. Sulpice. Nicollet's church home was a strange mixture of old and new. Even the exterior had mismatched towers. Inside, along with the beautiful sculptures, decorated domes, and awe-inspiring tapestries, the gnomon of St. Sulpice married science and religion together. With an inlaid line of brass on the top floor, a towering obelisk modeled on Egyptian art, and a transept window along the southern wall, the equinoxes could be accurately measured to determine the date for Easter. As much as he wanted to earnestly pray for those caught up in the violence, he also wanted to pray for himself, and at the gnomon, he hoped he could see a new path God set before him. But even more than that, he wanted to solve the mystery of Father Simmons and Lady Drummond's map. Nicollet heard a bold step across the street. Nicollet took a bold step across the street and immediately heard a gunshot come from the direction of the seminary. Was that directed at me? Nicollet wondered and hunched down, continuing across the street. A bullet ricocheted off the stairs in front of the church. Okay, that was a warning shot. Go back from where you came from, or next time we won't miss. I'm a friend of the church, Nicollet wanted to shout, but he turned tail and ran back across the narrow street from which he'd come. Paris has gone mad, he decided, after he was almost killed by seminarians. He jogged back home and turned to his alley when he suddenly remembered he had a second stop to make, the most important stop. He turned back around and found the Rue de Conde, and even though the streets were narrow and tall, he found the big walnut tree behind the 10-foot wall. It only took a few moments to collect enough debris on the street for him to stand upon and reach the metal bars along the top. Cluck, 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 Nicollet called out loudly and then scaled the wall. He dropped right back over and into the darkness. What's it like out there? A man's voice called out softly in the darkness. Nicollet clutched at his chest before answering. Strangely quiet, although I was almost killed by seminarians at St. Sepulchre a few minutes ago. How many do you need? A half-dozen would suffice for a few days. Cosette Lavoisier told me you had fresh eggs, but that I could not use the front door. If you had waited, I have a basket I would have lowered over the wall. Oh, Nicollet chuckled. All I knew was the password. You may as well leave through the side door. If people see you hopping back over my wall, it might start a trend. Thank you. I haven't eaten for 2 days. These riots caught me ill-prepared. What rock have you been hiding under? The stranger led Nicollet through the dimly lit storage room and out the kitchen door, which was promptly locked. With 6 eggs wrapped in cloth, he walked briskly back home. Finally, he stepped back into his alley and found the rear door to his apartment. He knocked with the heel of his foot, but Cosette did not answer the door. With his left hand, he held the eggs against his chest so he could open the door. Stepping back into his kitchen, he found things mostly as he'd left them. The cooking utensils were ready, the stove was lit, and all the ingredients for his omelet were ready except for the eggs, which he dropped on the floor. For sitting in the chair where he'd kissed Cosette upon the cheek sat a man holding his flintlock pistol. Chapter 5. I'm going to die on an empty stomach. In the cradle of his left arm, Nicollet still held 3 of the 6 eggs. On the assumption that I might live to fight another day, pardon me while I tend to my eggs. With his left toe fixed to the floor, he took one long step with his right foot toward the table, setting the cloth and eggs on the edge of the table. Once deposited, he returned to his little island on the kitchen floor, stooped down to scoop up the cracked eggs. and then repeated his extended step, except for setting the cracked eggs onto his breakfast plate. Leaning back to where he'd stopped, Nicollet sighed and calmly said, "Now, what has become of Cosette? She was going to prepare an omelette." The man sitting at the table had a slender face that had been freshly shaved. His gray hair was full despite being at least 50. A small scar hid in his right eyebrow, leaving a little gap where no hair grew, the only flaw in an otherwise manicured facade. He dressed in dull colors, but the fabric was expensive and pristine. "May I sit?" Nicollet asked. "Seeing you with my gun has made me a little nervous." "No, but I can imagine how I felt when the same gun was pointed in my face." "Where is Cosette?" The pistol clunked onto the table as the man set it down and slid it to the middle of the table. Slid it to the middle. "She is far safer than you are. Men will be coming to torture and kill you." "Oh dear. Desperate times lead to desperate measures. I didn't realize I'd made such enemies." "The pistol is closer to me than it is to him. If I lunged for it..." The man chuckled. "Enemies? It seems there is a good reason for you to have such a fine pistol. Who would have no motive to kill such a noble little fellow as yourself?" "He's trying to elicit information. Is he an ally?" "I have no idea who would stoop to such measures. How do you know someone is coming to kill me when all of Paris is up in arms?" "A single death during a riot would almost go unnoticed. Running around during a riot is foolish, but it is more foolish to remain here any longer." "Who is this man?" Nicollet wondered. God, what's wrong? Here we go. "Do I know him?" With his feet still firmly planted, he leaned slightly to one side to note the long wool coat draped over the legs of the chair. "Foolish to remain here? Tell me, Mr. Wool Jacket, who would be so foolish as to want to kill me?" "Mr. Wool Jacket," the man laughed. "For now you may call me Signora Giacca, Lana Giacca. There is your first clue." Friendly yet mysterious, and Italian. He spun my Italian phrase into a name. "As you wish, Mr. Giacca." "Unfortunately, the same men who have been trying to kill me for most of my life. You just don't know their names. First, you have quite a few enemies with motive, don't you?" "Yeah, you have. Okay, first there was that very public feud with Francois Arago over some celestial matter that gave me a headache." "Arago? The man is a liar and fabricates data to advance his career. Of course I called in a few favors to sabotage his publications. The man was going to tarnish the reputation of the observatory." "Arago is a member of the Carbonari," Giacca said with disdain. "The Carbonari have been carefully plotting this revolt for months, along with the help of Masonic lodges and other covert organizations of a more nefarious nature. If Arago wasn't so busy with more important matters, you'd probably be dead in an alley somewhere. Don't you remember what happened in the last revolution?" "I remember it all too well." "Arago would never send someone to kill me. We worked together for years. It would be beneath him." "You are right about Arago, but it wasn't beneath him to sabotage your career. While you didn't see the writing on the wall, he stole away all your supporters from the ancient regime with threats and coercion, even Humboldt and Laplace, which is why Arago was given the position you'd been groomed to receive. Where did that lead? You borrowed money from your liberal friends and invested it into stocks which were doomed to fail. Doomed to fail? Killing me will not help my friends regain their money. No, but the same men who lost their fortunes during the financial crash have now overthrown the Bourbon dynasty and will be in positions of power. Your life in Paris is over. The eyebrow. Giacca seems very familiar. How do I recognize him? Who is coming to kill me? A short time ago, an English noblewoman came to you with a map. This is about the map? Nicollet let out a long sigh. The police came and spoke to me about it. I spoke with private investigators hired by the Drummond family. Everyone knows I had an alibi. King Charles could verify my alibi. Everyone knows you had an alibi, including the man who murdered Lady Drummond. But now everyone knows you've seen the map and the secrets it holds, which has put your life in danger. Danger? Nicollet asked, blinking his tired eyes repeatedly. I've followed your career, so I know about your impressive academic abilities. Isn't it rumored that you can look at a book once and recall every word on every page? You saw the map, which means you are the map. If someone was willing to pay a fortune for the map, you have value. If another party was willing to murder to acquire the map, you are in danger. This is ridiculous. The map isn't real. It's fable. Lady Drummond might have well had a map to the Atlantis or El Dorado or the Fountain of Youth. Lady Drummond is very dead, and the men who killed her are very real, and they know who you are. Now, go pack up a chest because we are leaving in 10 minutes. Leaving? You're abducting me? Nicky, I am saving you. Only 2 people called me Nicky. My mother and... Who are you? You don't remember me? Then I need you to trust me. I've spent my life investigating legends, lore, and secret societies. There are 2 powerful factions that know the name Jean-Nicolas Nicollet, and I am not about to let you become a victim of your ignorance. Now, go pack. We don't have much time. Nicollet took a few steps right past the pistol on the table. Where are you taking me? Someplace safe, at least for the rest of the summer. The rest of the summer? Giacca rose and followed Nicollet a few paces behind. How am I supposed to pack enough clothes to last me a few weeks? Nicollet looked to the front door, which had been barricaded from the inside with tables and chairs. He also looked to the window, which would only allow him to run from the frying pan of an abduction and into the fire of a revolution. He walked up the stairs to his bedroom and study. With Giacca standing in the hallway with his arms crossed, Nicollet yanked a large chest from his closet and found his favorite outfits and a few bow ties. Next, he tossed an assortment of toiletries into the chest, along with a robe and sleeping garments. A single chest? Nicollet complained again. Can you help me carry it into the study for a moment? Giacca obliged, and Nicollet realized the man had to be 4 to 5 inches taller than 6 foot. I am indeed a gnome. In the study, Nicollet took a moment to make some key decisions. Ego, he said while waiting. This is punishment for having a big ego. When I received that cursed letter from Lady Drummond, she caught my attention with flattery. As soon as she called me a foremost expert in all astronomical matters, I walked right into this fiasco. We can talk about it later, Professor Nicollet. Do I know you? You know me, and you have a familiar look. I'm repaying a favor. We can talk about our shared history once we are out of Paris. Now hurry up, we don't have much time. Nicollet walked over to the shelf of his private library and retrieved his sextant from the shelf. The metallic device, built of brass knobs, swivels, and angled bars, was used to compare the angles of stars against the horizon in order to navigate. Although an antique, it was functional and precious to him. His dead mentor, Pierre Simon Laplace, had given it to him as a gift. Arago coerced Laplace into stealing the observatory from me. How did my life tumble off its axis so quickly? The Drummond map is the final nail in the coffin. Next, he found the barometer. Unlike the sextant, it was a state-of-the-art instrument given to him by a living mentor, Alexander von Humboldt. The German scientists gave him the instrument before leaving for Berlin with his new mentee, Louis Agassiz, a Swiss geologist. How have I lost both Juliana and Alexander? Both wanted love I could not offer. Are those instruments really necessary? Giacca asked impatiently. Yes, Nicollet insisted emphatically. They are keys to a new field of science. I will use both astronomy and meteorology to create maps indicating astronomy. It's my chance to restart my career. Plus, they hold sentimental value for me. And what is life without sentiment? Nicollet placed the sextant and the barometer into the chest, which filled quicker than he'd hoped. Nicollet turned to his shelves of books and hastily grabbed Archidoxus Magica by Philippus Aurelius Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. He set the big leather-bound book into one of the two remaining cavities in the chest. Giacca eyed it with raised eyebrow. Something about Lady Drummond's map caught your attention, Professor Nicollet? Yes, Mr. Giacca, especially after the police came and spoke to me. I must admit to having a restless mind. I have trouble sleeping, and puzzles distract me. You were right about my memory, and even though I can still picture the map, I don't honestly understand most of it. Even the wisest of men have struggled to solve the riddles upon that map, Giacca said. Nicollet ignored the taunt and returned to his shelf to find a few more books with connections to the Drummond map. He found Astronomy in the Islamic World, as well as Constellations and Their Meanings, which he tossed into the final space of the chest. Curiosity killed the cat, Giacca said. I'm glad we found you when we did. Your enemies believe you are ignorant. That should give us the advantage for our grand endeavor. What endeavor? I'll explain on the way, Giacca said as he picked up one end of the chest. Nicollet took the other end of the chest, and the two of them walked down the stairs, through his quiet living room, and back into the kitchen. He jumped when he saw 5 men standing in the kitchen, but Giacca seemed to expect them, setting down his end of the chest to ask, How are things? One of them answered back, We escorted Miss Lavoisier back to her home and left her with money and instructions. She seemed quite amiable. Oh, thank goodness. Another stranger added, We've also found a route out of the city and a carriage. Excellent, Mr. Giacca said to his team of men. Load up Professor Nicollet's belongings and put them on that carriage. I want out of the city as soon as possible. Nicollet glanced at the 6 eggs on the table. You would have made a good omelet. Hours later, Professor Nicollet was safely out of the city. King Charles and his son abdicated the throne, and Krasden Krai stood over a plate of cracked eggs. Some of the yolk had dried on the plate, but most remained still inside the egg. He opened the eggs into a pan and in minutes had the eggs cooked and scrambled. Consider yourself lucky, Professor Nicollet, Krai thought. It would have been convenient to kill both Berenger and Nicollet during the riots, but even though the scientist had seen the map, he had no idea why others were willing to kill for it. With a full stomach, Krai sighed and then proceeded to start a fire in the kitchen. Perhaps now I can go back to America to finish the work of my Lady Columbia, Krai hoped. Chapter 6. During the Reign of Terror, in the First French Revolution, nearly 17,000 were guillotined along with Marie Antoinette. 40,000 prisoners were also executed by the enragés, the enraged ones. Within 10 years, the Catholic Church withered from a dominant position to near extinction. Catholic leaders were killed, priests and nuns were thrown out of parishes, religious holidays were removed, and the classic 7-day week was turned into a 10-day week to remove the emphasis on Sundays. Even Pope Pius VI and his military forces were defeated by Napoleon, who brought him back to France to eventually die as his prisoner. Although the papacy and the Catholic Church were restored following the defeat of Napoleon in 1814, the once powerful Society of Jesus, known commonly as the Jesuits, barely survived the anti-clerical purge. Earlier in the month, Cardinal Gustave Maximilien Juste de Croix-Souray had retreated from the city of Paris to his home Château de l'Ermitage in ruin. Far from the revolutionaries in Paris, the mansion was easily secured while all of France waited to see what would happen during the French Revolution of 1830. Several political figures stayed in the massive three-story mansion with the cardinal, including a scientist who'd recently given the cardinal and King Charles a tour of the heavens. Now, standing at one of the many windows of the mansion, Conrad Simmons gazed out onto the Now, standing at one of the many windows of the mansion, Conrad Simmons gazed out onto the manicured lawns, wondering what Nicollet would decide. "I wouldn't have brought Nicollet here if I didn't think he was the right man for the job," Simmons said, turning back to the grand desk that belonged to the cardinal. But Cardinal Croix-Souray did not sit at the desk. Not even Simmons knew the name of the man who'd been sent to discuss the future of Nicollet. For, like himself, he was a man of aliases that lived in the shadows of society. Simmons knew him only as Father Blanco Lupo, a pathetic alias. "Can we trust this watchmaker's son?" Lupo asked. "I can trust Nicollet, but can I trust you and your people?" he thought. "He is the right man at the right time," Simmons insisted. "What else is there to discuss?" "He doesn't belong to either of us." "This isn't the first time we've hired an independent agent to do an investigation," Simmons pressed. "Nicollet is a fervent believer and a scientist, a dying breed these days. The only reason we're having this conversation is the previous independent agent was sent to investigate the same legend, either betrayed us or failed miserably. If Lesueur failed, why are our enemies killing themselves over the Drummond map? They continue the race while we stand still." "Nicollet is already compromised," Lupo asserted. "The Order of Eos knows he has seen the map, thanks to Lady Drummond, and whoever killed her will also know he's seen it." "Do we know who killed her yet?" "Not yet," Simmons admitted. "We monitored his house for this past month, hoping the killer would step into the trap. Gerard Berenger was killed during the riots." "Berenger?" Lupo asked. "The buyer. He had connections to the Order of Eos in America." "I want to know who killed Lady Drummond. I already know all I want to know about the Order of Eos. Perhaps you should have left Nicollet dangling as bait rather than bringing him here." "Don't you understand? Whether this is truth or a hoax, we're still in a race. Nicollet is the only man who can unravel this mystery before our enemies figure it out, or worse, find it." Simmons had infiltrated enough secret societies to know the rumors about it. From the Templars to the Order of Eos, the legend pervaded both literature and folktales. Even a secret branch of the church, the Periphery, actively searched for it. As an intelligent agent for the ailing Pope Pius VIII, Simmons knew all about the political aspirations of modern organizations like the Carbonari, Illuminati, and Freemasons, but he also knew their occult secrets. Like Nicollet, curiosity drove him to test the theory. Father Lupo finished mulling over the idea. "So, what is your plan?" "Professor Nicollet is about to have a scientific midlife crisis. With the French Revolution, his financial ruin, and being passed over for the observatory, Nicollet will be a man looking for greener pastures in America, a vast, unmapped region just waiting for a scientist to explore it. As it so happens, Nicollet has learned a new map-making technique, barometric science, which can determine elevation, a helpful tool when mapping watersheds. The Order of Eos knows he's seen the map, and the thief will have the Drummond map. Won't Nicollet's actions doom him to failure? Ah, but no one fully understands the old map. And you believe Nicollet does? Simmons nodded. Yes, he's seen it, and we know what our enemies are looking for. A watershed. A place where rivers flow in all directions. Baron Lahontan confirmed its existence, and later, Pierre Charles went with his team of miners. And if Lesueur already claimed the treasure, then why do our enemies still look for it in the frontiers of America? Lady Drummond was murdered for a reason. That is what I do, Father Lupo. I spent my life infiltrating these secret societies. The race continues, and I don't want to come in last place. Father Lupo shook his head slowly. If Nicollet is everything you claim, and he finds this treasure, then what? You and I are allies, but the Catholic Church in the periphery might have different views on the treasure. Do we want the treasure to be found? Ask yourself that question, Mr. Simmons. Better than it falling into the hands of our enemies. Lupo scoffed with a slight smile, if it even exists. Lupo was softening, Simmons realized, and waited. I would want Nicollet supervised. I'd want a periphery agent, ideally a Jesuit, somehow embedded in his expedition. Of course. Your agents have already provided His Holiness with valuable information about what's happening on the frontiers, which is why I wanted to work with you on this mission. Father Lupo nodded. Well, we can hammer out the little details later. Let's meet the man. Simmons walked past the desk to the large double doors. When he opened them, he saw Cardinal Croix-Soleil standing in the lobby with Nicollet. The Cardinal's probably curious about what's going on today, but let him focus on matters of statecraft while we chase after legends and lore. Professor Nicollet, please come in, Simmons said. Nicollet nervously brushed off his red vest and affirmed his buttons when, with a quick step, followed Simmons into the lion's den. I would like you to meet Father Blanco Lupo, a dear friend from Rome. Nicollet walked up to the edge of the desk and vigorously shook Father Lupo's hand. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Father White Wolf. Mr. Giacca has told me so little about you. Should I also adopt a pseudonym? I could be Starman. The little fellow's agitated. I hope he does not ruin this. Mr. Giacca? Father Lupo asked as both men sat down. A little inside joke, Simmons explained. Before we were reacquainted with one another, he dubbed me Lana Giacca, Mr. Wooljacket. Lupo laughed. It is a good alias. Before we discuss business, I'd like to thank you for being a hero of the faith. Your bravery as a young man helped preserve the Catholic Church during the dark days. If not for your family's sacrifice, Mr. Simmons would not be sitting here with us today. The scar on his right eyebrow suddenly itched, and Simmons felt his fingers touching an old wound. 3 decades earlier, the rabble from the French Revolution reached Nicollet's home in Savoy. Simmons and 4 other seminarians were in the city of Chambéry when the mob stormed the church, killed the priests and teachers. Conrad and the others managed to escape while the rioters decided what to do with them, but blood was in the air, and they followed them to the village of Cluse. A sharp rock had hit Simmons in the brow, almost blinding him. Because of the wound and the terror of the pack of hunters, he did not remember much of the Nicollet house where they'd been given shelter. He remembered the kindness of the mother, the concern of the father, and the wonder of the children who gathered together, huddled in fear. And he remembered young Nicollet. In the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness, young Nicky led the 5 seminarians up a narrow goat path that led into the Alps. Several days later, through 50 miles of rugged mountain terrain, Nicky brought them to safety at Fribourg, Switzerland. The young boy shook their hands before he bounded back down the goat path to a home that no longer existed. Father Conrad Simmons told himself to remember the boy, Nicollet, the son of Francois and Marie. From time to time over the past 30 years, he checked on the boy who'd saved his life, and when the secret societies he'd been spying on during that time suddenly began to speak of the astronomer, Simmons found a way to repay the favor by saving his life. Mr. Simmons has told me all about your harrowing ordeal and encounter with the Drummond map, so let me be plain. We'd like to hire you to investigate a legend. What sort of legend? Nicollet asked. Don't be coy. Mr. Simmons told me about your academic talents and that if you've seen the map, then you can still picture all the details. Seeing and understanding are two different things, Nicollet added. Yes, and I'm sure the map had all sorts of strange occult puzzles that meant nothing to you. In the past, we've hired men with vast occult and paranormal training to unlock the meaning, all for naught. Nothing was ever found. This time, we'd like to hire a scientist. A bankrupt scientist with a tarnished reputation, Nicollet chuckled. God continues to give me signs now if I only get convinced Nicollet of it. And one who has recently learned barometric science from Alexander von Humboldt. Nicollet nodded, but then added, perhaps he should be sitting in this chair. From what Mr. Simmons has told me, you are a devout man of God, which is why your rising star has suddenly fallen. Let me show you specifically what we'd like from you, Father Lupo said, and then reached for the two maps. He first unrolled Baron Lahotten's map. In the 1680s, a Frenchman by the name of Baron Lahotten journeyed into the American frontier. As you can clearly see, the features of the Great Lakes are clearly identified, as well as a poor understanding of the newly discovered Mississippi River. But the rest of the details shown on this map are befuddling. Riviera Longue, Nicollet noted. The Long River. Yes, a tributary of the Mississippi River, according to Lahotten, which led him to the River of Death, Nicollet finished. How cryptic. And what do you see here, Professor Nicollet? It is a watershed, a geographic divide that sends water flowing in different directions, the headwaters of a river. According to the story, Baron Lahotten went to this place, where he met with exotic Indian tribes who guarded a mysterious treasure, Father Lupo said, which leads us to Pierre Charles Lesueur. Father Lupo unrolled another map. As you can see, this map was made a decade later by an associate of Lesueur, who traveled into the unknown to mine copper. Copper? Nicollet recoiled. A worthless endeavor, yes, although the details of the Mississippi River are more refined on this map. You can see the pattern is similar, a tributary of the Mississippi that leads to a watershed, and at this watershed, a mine. Yes, Fort La Houlier, it was called, in honor of the farmer general at the time, and purported alchemist, who funded Lesueur's foolish endeavor. Nicollet nodded in understanding. And you believe that Lady Drummond's map matches Lesueur's mine and Lahotten's mysterious treasure? America is a vast continent, Simmons began. We are only beginning to understand what lies west of the Mississippi. We want you to find this watershed. And the treasure? Why were men willing to kill Lady Drummond? What will I find when I reach the end of the rainbow? Simmons decided to give him the sane challenge first. Don't fret about the talk of treasure. We offer you support of the finest Jesuit universities in both Washington, D.C. and St. Louis. We will support a mapping expedition that will establish your new career as America's finest cartographer. Find the true location of Fort La Houlier. It doesn't sound as crazy as I thought it would, Simmons thought as he leaned back in this chair. Nicollet looked at the two maps for a moment and then suddenly stood up, extending his hand to Father Lupo. As much as my mother would have wanted me to accept this covert mission on behalf of the church, I must politely decline your offer. I am a humble professor, and come September, I have classes to teach at the Naval Academy in Brest. I am too old to be running around the world. You fool, Simmons wanted to shout. You have no life to go back to. But then Nicollet turned and warmly shook his hand also. Will you be offering me a ride back to Paris, or must I see to it myself? Chapter 7. The pounding in William Drummond Stewart's head did not just come from the jug of Drambuie whiskey he'd consumed the previous night, but from knocking at the front door. Don't they know to leave me alone? Stewart thought and groaned. I'll have to speak to my brother about the damn servants. The knocking continued. Wake Duncan with thy knocking, Stewart muttered Shakespeare, causing stirring beside him. Stewart kicked under the sheets until he found a hairy leg, and continued until he found one much smoother. He nudged it softly. Christina, get dressed and answer the door. Christina Battersby woke with a gasp and then slid off the side of the big bed. Sunlight came from the top of the velvet curtains, indicating it was late in the morning, if not already noon. Stewart watched with a smirk as the curvy servant girl had to walk around the canopy bed in the nude to retrieve her clothes that had been ripped off the previous night. She looked back at the bed, shaking her head in disbelief. It had taken half a bottle for her to consent. With her simple clothes back on, she opened the bedroom door, flooding the chamber with even more light, allowing Stewart to see the clock on the wall. It is almost noon. He reached out a hand and found a hairy chest, which he shoved hard. Get up, you're late. The figure moved. What? You're late, Elliot. You were going to speak to my brother up at the big house about the constable's position in Perth? Oh, shit. Elliot McKinley sat up in bed, tossed the sheets aside, and jumped naked from the bed, searching for his clothes the same way Christina had done. McKinley hopped on one foot as he slid his trousers back on, slipping into his boots, and then snatched up his shirt and overcoat. Thanks again, Captain Billy, McKinley said, and then glanced back at him with his crooked, dimpled grin. For everything. Then McKinley vanished out the door, still dressing himself. I guess he got what he was looking for, Stewart thought, but the hangover kept him from enjoying any of the decadent moments from the previous night. He heard Christina in the entryway speaking to the idiot that had been knocking on the door, but he could not hear what was being said. A few moments later, he heard the stairs creak as Christina returned. Who was it? He said he's an investigator. Open locks, whoever knocks. Sergeant Cairns has already returned from France. Despite the nausea and throbbing head pain, Stewart sat up. Help me get dressed. Of course, Lord Stewart, she said, and picked up the only clothes remaining on the floor, extending her arm with his briefs in one hand. One by one, she handed him all the items of his formal attire. Your cute friend left quickly, Christina said. Yes, he was late for an appointment with my brother up at the castle. He's very charming. Is he married? He is, actually, but we know each other from our time in the Waterloo campaign. Men who fight and die together have a strong bond. Yes, I seem to remember some of that last night, Christina said with a grin. Of all the women in and around Perthshire, Christina had the most liberal mind. Despite her position in life as a servant, she understood him better than anyone else, especially his appetites. Should I be jealous? Ah, he's just a ship passing in the night. You will always have a part in my life. Now, let's go see what Sergeant Cairns learned. Sergeant Louis Cairns went over the whole report while Christina prepared lunch for the two men conversing at the kitchen table. Cairns was a man in his mid-40s, still fit and serious. In the Napoleonic Wars, he'd been a veteran platoon sergeant who privately gave the young lieutenant sage advice. Now, he gave Stewart a dry account of the murder of his Aunt Maggie and his cousin, Susan Drummond. Cairns ended up getting slowed by the simmering revolution, as well as the fact that he needed to do 2 investigations. So it was not the buyer who killed her? This Beringer fellow? Beringer was poisoned even though he didn't have the map, Cairns recapped. The killer either did it out of spite or because Beringer knew too much. Why didn't she listen to me? The Almeric map was my uncle's most prized possession. This is my fault for not warning her better. I went through Beringer's shop with a fine-tooth comb and have a few leads regarding Beringer's client. I already have a good idea who would have wanted it. When I helped her sort through my uncle's vast library, I found a few family trees and correspondence. Apparently, there were 2 rival families seeking the same goal. The map? A treasure, actually. Stewart rolled his eyes and shrugged. Tell me more about the killer. A fairly sophisticated assassin, I'd assume. The man who hired him must come from either wealth or power, with a network of spies able to intercept the mail from either Lady Drummond or Beringer. But no leads yet. What about this Nicollet fellow? Cairns shook his head. Tight alibi, no motives, just a man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Your aunt used him to drive up the price, and if I didn't know better, it almost cost Nicollet his life. How so? His house burned down a day after Beringer was killed. Your nemesis wants all knowledge of this map wiped from the earth, I'd guess. It does seem that way. I appreciate everything you've done for me. How much do I owe you, Lewis? For the hero of Hougoumont? Nothing. I owe you everything, Captain Stewart. Please, Lewis. You were here for weeks, right after a bloody revolution. Christina returned with 2 plates of steaming food. For the hero of Hougoumont. Cairns grinned at the chemistry shown between the 2. Has he told you about it? I've seen a few of his scars, so I knew he fought in a war, but no. Hougoumont was the turning point of the entire war. It was a small farm with a rock wall, and the young lieutenant and our sharpshooters fortified that spot as the entire French army tried to sweep through to cut off an escape route. But it was a trap within a trap. Tell her, William. Stewart sighed, but Christina held her hands on her hips, wide hips, waiting for an answer. My men were told to hold the gate, so we held the gate, despite how many Frenchmen poured through. By the end, we didn't even need the gate. The bodies were piled so high. The little house held, the position held, and Napoleon fell, all because I held that gate to the last man. A lot of friends died that day. Cairns reveled in the memory. We were down to just a dozen men trapped in a stone house. The French sent this monster of a man to chop down that farmhouse door with an axe. And when he poured through, Stewart dodged 3 swings from that big axe before he took his head clean off. Fucking French. Stewart shook his head and nodded. As your lord said, we won the fight, won the day, won the battle, and won the war, Cairns praised. Well, he might be the black sheep of the family. You treat this man like he's the King of England. I already do, Christina replied at the stove. Seriously, though, I must give you something in return for your help. Nonsense. You needed help, and I was more than willing to give it. Despite all of his flaws, Stewart had learned the meaning of loyalty during the Napoleonic Wars, and he knew what had to happen next. How about following me to America? Excuse me? Christina also echoed, excuse me? My Aunt Maggie needs to be avenged, and the only way to find her killer is to go where the map leads, and wait. So where does this map lead? So where does this map lead? Cairns asked. There are several maps and several accounts, which is why they don't know where to go. But I've seen the map in my Uncle William's library, and whoever stole the map will draw attention searching for it, and then vengeance will be mine. Chapter 8. Professor Nicollet hurried across the Cour Napoleon, allowing himself a quick glance at the Arc de Triomphe, just to confirm it remained following the July Revolution. As he neared the main entrance of the Palais des Louvres, he pulled his father's pocket watch out of his pocket. "I'm late." He jogged up the stone steps, across the landing, and entered the front doors of the oldest part of the Louvre. "We are closing in 5 minutes," a man at the doorway said. "Yes, I'm here to meet with Monsieur Champollion. Here's the letter he sent to me in Brest. Could you direct me to the Egyptian history exhibit?" The Rosetta Stone, an ancient Egyptian stele with 3 versions of a royal decree, was discovered in 1799 by the French forces of Napoleon. For thousands of years, ancient Egyptian scripts were a dead language that no living man could read, until Jean-Francois Champollion cracked the code and unlocked thousands of years of Egyptian history. Although Champollion was only a boy when the Rosetta Stone was discovered, he cracked the code at the age of 34 and became an international celebrity, which allowed him to return to Egypt, bringing back relics and artifacts from the Valley of the Kings to the Louvre. After the turmoil of the July Revolution ended, Champollion found himself promoted to chair of Egyptian history and archaeology and curator of the Louvre's exhibit, which is where Nicollet found his friend and peer. Nicollet spun himself in a circle as he walked by the Sphinx in the middle of the room, almost didn't see Champollion hidden by crates and boxes, who called out loudly, "You're late." "It was much easier when all I had to do was walk across the bridge," Nicollet said. "Give my apologies to Rosine." "Ah, you know how she is. She's used to me being away. It is Zora you should apologize to. How is your precious daughter?" "She cries when I try to kiss her with this beard. What do you think? Should I keep it or shave it?" "You look like a Bedouin," Nicollet said. "I've never been able to grow a beard." Champollion laughed loudly. "I suppose I keep it to remind my peers that I've been to Egypt. Perhaps it is time I should shave it." "Plot a course," Nicollet reminded himself. "I've heard you have the mummy of Ramses the Great in here." "Mummy? No. But we did find the tomb of old Ozymandias." "It must be fascinating to unearth relics from the old world." "Ironic, but you are steering him in the right direction." "It is like opening the book of Exodus and seeing it come to life before your very eyes." "Yes, I do not think you would like what I learned. The dates written upon the tablets include dynasties that predate your book of Genesis. My only regret is that I wasn't able to go to Egypt before it had been looted and plundered so badly. Imagine what I could have discovered if I'd found her a virgin and pristine." "Virgin and pristine, like the American frontier." "Someone told me you carved your own name into a line of pharaohs. Does that mean 1,000 years from now you'll be considered Pharaoh of Egypt?" Nicollet said, and regretted his need to counterpunch. "I don't think I'll be welcome back to Egypt, especially after the plundering I've done." Champollion stood up from where he crouched and stretched his back. "Before we waste any time, I just want you to know that I will not be able to give you a loan. So if you've come to borrow money, the answer is no." "Is that how my friends see me? A desperate beggar?" "I'm not here for money. I have a minor position proctoring exams in Brest until I can find steady employment. I'm here to ask you a few professional questions." "Yes, so you alluded in your letter." "Well, let's see it. Let's see this ancient language you need decoded." "Remember what Father Simmons said. Don't show him too much." Nicollet reached for his leather satchel and set it down on one of the crates. Inside, he found his leather-bound notebook where he kept his drawings. Past the drawn images of the Drummond map, he found the phrases he'd seen upon it. "Reveal it slowly, or he will laugh at you and throw you out of his museum. Here is a strange phrase. I believe it might be Arabic." Nicollet knew what it said from the astronomical identifiers he'd seen on the Drummond map. While human languages changed or died, the language of astronomy stayed the same since the dawn of mankind. Yes, it is close to Arabian. It appears to be Phoenician. You can decipher it? Yes, Phoenician is considered the father of modern languages until recently. It developed side by side with Egyptian hieroglyphics and shared traits with Hebrew, which is why it doesn't have any vowels. What does it say? Champollion stared intently and then smiled, throwing a skeptical look at Nicollet. Are you teasing me? No, what does it say? Animal groin? Nicollet steered. Or loin of the bear? Champollion looked back, this time laughing at himself. Yes, now I see it. Loin of the beast. The lack of vowels produces an imperfect translation. Where did you see this phrase? Lie to him. A professor, history professor in Brest, showed me his collection of old astronomical maps. It was a star map that showed Ursa Major, which would most likely make the translation the loin of the bear. It is a reference to one of the 7 stars in the asterism. The star is known as Merak, the lower of the 2 pole stars used by navigators to find the North Star. Lower star, groin. Now I understand it. Merak, huh? I thought it might be Arabian because they were some of the finest astronomers and scientists in the day. Our modern word Merak is based on the old Arabian El-Marak. But you believe this is Phoenician? Those symbols were written down by Ursa Major. I'm fairly certain of it. He's interested. Now keep him going. The Phoenicians were a seafaring civilization on the Mediterranean. Is that why their language was so influential? Champollion accepted the theory with a nod. It was the original language of commerce, technology. Technologically, the Phoenicians were far more advanced than other cultures, which allowed them to sail wherever there was money to be made. If you wanted to trade with them, you'd learn their language, which is why linguists credit them with being the father of languages. What time period did they exist? At their height, 1000 BC. Eventually, Alexander the Great defeated them when he destroyed Tyre. But the zenith of their culture occurred long before that. Again, they weren't conquerors, just sailors. How far did they sail? What was the range of their empire? Champollion tilted his head like a confused puppy. Go ahead. Let's see how hard he laughs at you. Could the Phoenicians have reached North America before Christopher Columbus? Champollion shook his head. No one knew America existed. But Plato described the lost continent of Atlantis being beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is how the Atlantic Ocean received its name. If the Greeks believed there to be a continent beyond the Straits of Gibraltar, why couldn't the Phoenicians believe the same thing? Don't the Welsh, Norse, Irish, and Scots tell stories about finding America prior to Columbus? Perhaps there is truth in their stories. Are you saying you looked at a Phoenician star map that described the American continent? I wish I'd never seen it. I also thought it was a hoax, but the Phoenician text seems to indicate it was made almost 3,000 years ago, doesn't it? Phoenician, like Egyptian hieroglyphics, is not a lost language. Right now, I could write ancient Hebrew upon the map, but that does not mean it is an old map, does it? Only an old language. Oh, I am not defending the notion. I'm just trying to understand what I saw, Nicollet said, and began flipping through the notebook in a way only he understood. The Drummond map was parceled into 100 pieces upon the pages of the notebook, and only his mind knew where they belonged. Nicollet suspected upon first glance what the Drummond map had shown. Now he needed to have Champollion say it. There were some strange symbols on the map as well, which made me think of you. For what reason? At first, I thought it was a reference to Egypt. The river could have been the Nile River, and the symbols were the Great Pyramids. But there are strange markings on the pyramids. Play dumb. Feed his ego. Let me see that, Champollion said, and before Nicollet knew, he'd taken the notebook away. These aren't pyramids. These are the 4 elements of alchemy: fire, air, water, and earth. Please, can I have that back? Nicollet said, and lunged for it, only to have Champollion turn a shoulder and walk away with it. He leaned in closer with some pages, his brow wrinkled. With other pages, he cracked a wry grin. What in the world is all of this gibberish? I was hoping you could tell me. You've been pranked. Do you want to know what this is all about? This single symbol right here explains it all. An outer circle with a circle inside of a square inside of a triangle. Do you know what this refers to? It is the symbol for the Philosopher's Stone. He confirmed it. Now, make him put it all together. The what? A good Catholic boy like you has never heard about the Philosopher's Stone? It was science before there was science. Alchemy before chemistry. I suppose you went to schools after Antoine Lavoisier separated science from the occult. Prior to modern chemistry, alchemy focused on the study of the elements, and the Philosopher's Stone was the quest to understand how the elements worked. So was it a literal rock or a symbolic quest? At one time, both. The actual Philosopher's Stone could transform objects and elements as an alkahest. It would transform lead into gold, Nicollet added, still playing dumb. See, you've heard of it. Champollion turned his attention back to the pages of the notebook. Wait. I remember you talking about trouble right before the July Revolution. An Englishwoman was murdered. Did she show you this? Please, forget I ever said anything about it. Forget I even came here today. For your sake. Oh, how intriguing. She was murdered for a treasure map. A map to the location of the Philosopher's Stone. Can I have this back for a moment? Nicollet took the notebook away from his old friend and flipped to the image that had brought him back to Paris. He kept his finger there, and then flipped back to the basic alchemy elements. So the upside-down pyramid with a line through it is the water symbol. Does it have a name? Yes, I believe an alchemist named Paracelsus dubbed them Gnome for earth, Salamander for fire, Sylph for air, and Undine for water. Undine? Nicollet repeated, having already read Paracelsus. He just wanted Champollion to confirm his theory. On the Drummond map, 4 rivers on a foreign continent came together in a single spot. A scientific impossibility. At the place where the 4 rivers came together, the artist had also drawn a symbol of 2 pyramids touching point to point, divided by 3 lines. Is this also the symbol of the Undine? Nicollet asked. Yes and no. The top half of the symbol is the Undine, but as a whole, the 2 pyramids with the 3 lines are the symbol for copper. Copper? Nicollet said, reflecting on what Father Simmons had said about Pierre-Charles Lesueur mining copper at Fort La Houlier. I thought you said the Philosopher's Stone turned objects into gold. Solid copper transforms into powder known as vitriol, Champollion began. Say it, and I'll go. Say it, and I'll know I'm not imagining all of this. During his studies of alchemy, Paracelsus dug into its history, past the works of Rosenkreutz or Flamel to the Arabian scientists like Geber and Avicenna, all the way back to ancient Egypt, which explains the sacred geometry shown in the basic elements. And Solomon, don't forget King Solomon, Nicollet thought of his own theory. If Solomon wanted to sail, he would have hired Phoenician sailors. Champollion continued. Back then, the universal solvent was known as azoth or ormos. But During his study of chemical transformation and his quest to find the stone itself, Paracelsus not only coined the 4 elemental names, but he also invented a new word, vitriol, copper residue. Yes, but here's the strangest part of the word in alchemy lore. Vitriol is an acronym for a Latin phrase, a manifesto of sorts. Visita interia, terra rectificando in venis occultum lapidum. He said it. Nicollet's heart fluttered. I can't believe he said it. Occultum lapidum? The phrase translates as, visit the interior of the earth. By rectification thou shalt find the hidden stone. Lady Drummond obviously had an old treasure map, one that leads to the Philosopher's Stone. So, X marks the spot? Nicollet asked about the symbol drawn over the place where the rivers came together. I guess if you're looking for the Philosopher's Stone, you'd look for vitriol, and then begin to dig. Nicollet slammed the book shut and slipped it back into his bag. I'm sorry for wasting so much of your time. This is very embarrassing. Please, for the friendship you bear me, do not tell anyone that I came to you with these crazy drawings. Paris already mocks me. I won't say a word, Champollion promised as Nicollet began to leave. You should come to my house and have supper. I have another destination in mind, Nicollet thought, and found himself walking out of the exhibit room. Remember, don't speak a word of the map or Lady Drummond. A crazy person murdered her, after all. Where are you going? Champollion called out. America, Nicollet answered, as the Phoenicians called it, Merrick. I'll follow the North Star. The loin of the beast will guide the way. I'm going to see if there is still a little magic out there in the world. And end chapter.